All right, so let's dive into this Martyn's Law thing that's been causing a stir in the UK.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people hear Martyn's Law and they immediately think
Right.
Manchester Arena bombing.
Yeah.
That's where it all started, right? Trying to stop that kind of tragedy from happening again.
Absolutely. It was a direct response to that horrific event.
But the thing that I think surprises people is that it's not just about big venues.
Exactly.
Like, it's not just Wembley Stadium or the O2 Arena or whatever.
It goes much broader than that.
Yeah, it's like, depending on the size, it could be your local pub. It could be that little theater down the street.
Yeah, if it fits the criteria.
It could even be like a business conference, you know? So it's like, wait a minute, does this apply to all E?
Right. It's not just for the mega events anymore.
So that's where I think it gets interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it's trying to shift the whole approach to security.
It's a big culture shift, really.
Yeah, because you hear security and you immediately think Fort Knox, lockdown, metal detectors everywhere.
Yeah, that fortress mentality.
But this is more about,
Preparedness?
yeah, preparedness,
Like fire drills.
fire drills. But for terrorism?
Exactly. Everyone knows what to do if the fire alarm goes off.
Right. You don't even think about it. You just do it.
This is trying to bring that same level of ingrained response to potential threats.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the logic here, but how does that actually play out?
So they've got this tiered system.
Okay.
You've got the standard tier, which is for your smaller venues.
All right,
And then you've got the enhanced tier for the bigger ones.
the big leagues.
Yeah, where the risks are potentially higher.
Okay, so even at that standard level, though,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just hoping for the best anymore.
Oh, no, there are some pretty significant requirements.
Yeah, like what are we talking about?
So even that favorite little pub of yours,
Yeah,
they're going to need to be doing risk assessments.
risk assessments for a pub.
Yep, thinking about the layout, the type of events they host, you know.
Really?
And then staff training, how to spot suspicious behavior.
Okay.
And of course, having those solid emergency plans in place.
Well, it's a lot more than just, like, don't serve them if they're drunk.
Definitely, this takes it to a whole other level.
So risk assessments, like, how does a pub owner even do that?
Well, they'd need to consider the specific risks associated with their venue.
Right.
Like the layout, any potential weak points, the type of crowd they attract.
So thinking about things like, if something were to happen,
Exactly.
where are the exits, where are the hiding places?
How easily could someone cause chaos, that sort of thing?
Okay, so it's like a common sense approach to identifying vulnerabilities.
It is. It's not rocket science, but it does require some thought.
So it's not about turning every bartender into James Bond,
No, not at all.
but it's about giving them the tools to be aware.
Aware and prepare.
Yeah, so they're not caught completely off guard.
Exactly.
So, like, give me an example. How would this play out in a real pub?
Okay, imagine you've got a big football match on.
All right, packed pub.
Right. Everyone's hyped up. Tensions might be running high.
Could be trouble.
So under Martyn's Law, that pub owner, they might think about adding extra staff that night.
Okay. More eyes on the ground?
Yeah, maybe have a designated meeting point outside if something happens.
Smart.
And just reminding staff to be vigilant, you know,
About.
unattended bags, anyone acting strangely, that sort of thing.
So it's like, be aware, but don't freak out.
Exactly. It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Okay, but I can already hear some pub owners out there
Oh, yeah.
grumbling about all this extra work.
The costs, the hassle.
Yeah, is this really necessary?
Well, you have to remember, statistically,
Yeah.
those smaller venues,
Ah,
they're far more common than the giant stadiums.
right. There's way more pubs than Wembley stadiums.
So if you can get all those smaller places prepared,
Yeah.
it creates a much wider safety net.
A society-wide effort.
Exactly. Everyone doing their bit.
Okay, so that's the standard tier, the smaller venues.
Right.
But then we jump up to the enhanced tier, and this is where things get a little more serious, right?
Yeah, this is where you start thinking metal detectors, security guards, the work.
The full 9 yards.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
It's all still risk-based.
Okay.
So you're not going to see the same level of security at every enhanced venue.
Right.
A football stadium with 80,000 screaming fans,
Yeah.
that's going to have different needs than a theater with 1,000 seats.
Makes sense.
They're not all treated the same. The law recognizes that.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Nope, it's a framework that venues have to adapt to their own context.
Okay, so like football stadium, you might need bag checks, security patrols.
Probably, yeah, depending on the specific threat assessment.
But a theater, Maybe just clear evacuation procedures, well-trained staff.
Yeah, that might be sufficient. It's about proportionality.
The level of security matches the level of risk.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got these tiers, these requirements.
Okay. Uh-huh.
But someone's got to make sure people are actually doing it right.
Oh, absolutely. That's where the regulator comes in.
The enforcer.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than just enforcement.
Okay.
They're also there to provide guidance,
Guidance.
especially to those smaller businesses that might be feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You're running a small pub, suddenly you're dealing with counter-terrorism measures.
It's a big leap.
It is, and that's where the regulator can step in.
So, like, what do they do?
They might provide templates for those risk assessments we talked about,
Okay.
offer training workshops for staff, maybe even have a dedicated helpline for businesses to call with questions.
So it's not just about showing up and slapping fines on people.
No, it's about working with businesses to implement these changes properly.
More of a partnership then.
Ideally, yes, everyone working together towards a safer environment.
Makes sense.
The goal is to support, not just punish.
Right, because ultimately, everyone wants the same thing.
Which is?
To be safe,
Of course.
but also to be able to enjoy those public spaces.
Right, to not feel like we're living in a constant state of fear.
Exactly. Finding that balance is key.
Absolutely, that's the challenge.
And that's where things get interesting.
Definitely. Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, there's a lot more to talk about.
There is, definitely.
But for now, we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll dig a little deeper into some of the challenges and potential downsides of Martyn's Law.
Sounds good.
Deep Dive is a must-subscribe channel for anyone who wants to stay informed and engaged with the world around them. With its comprehensive coverage, in-depth analysis, and engaging content, Deep Dive is sure to enrich your knowledge and broaden your horizons. So, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Deep Dive today and start your journey to becoming a more informed and engaged individual.
It's a tough one for sure.
Because on the one hand, you've got the goal of preventing these horrible attacks.
Yeah, no one wants to see another Manchester.
God forbid, no.
But at the same time, you don't want to create a society where everyone's looking over their shoulder all the time.
Right, where going to the pub feels like going through airport security.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
So how do we strike that balance then?
Well, that's where this whole risk-based approach comes in.
Right, you mentioned that before.
It's about being smart and proportionate with the security measures.
So not treating every venue the same.
Exactly, like you said before.
Yeah.
A massive music festival with thousands of people crammed in.
Yeah, easy target.
That might need bag checks, sniffer dogs, the whole shebang.
Right, but a small art gallery opening,
Mm-hmm.
probably not so much.
Probably not. You'd be looking at different measures there.
So it's all about assessing the specific risks.
Exactly, and tailoring the security accordingly.
Okay, that makes sense, but what about the cost of all this?
Ah, the money question.
Especially for those smaller businesses, pubs, restaurants.
They're already struggling with rising costs.
Exactly, and now you're adding all these extra security burdens,
It's a valid concern, for sure.
like installing fancy new security systems,
Mhm. Expensive cameras, metal detectors.
hiring extra staff, all adds up. Could be a real breaking point for some places.
And that's why the role of the regulator is so crucial.
Right, going back to that guidance and support.
Exactly. They need to be proactive in helping businesses find affordable solutions.
So it's not just about, here's a law, figure it out on your own.
No, it needs to be a collaborative process.
So what could that look like?
Well, maybe the regulator could connect businesses with security providers that offer discounts for smaller venues. Or maybe they could offer training programs to help existing staff take on new responsibilities.
So they don't have to hire extra people.
Exactly. And in some cases, there might even be financial assistance available.
Government grants or something?
Potentially, yeah, if it's deemed necessary.
Okay, so there are options. It's not just a sink or swim situation.
The key is to make sure those options are accessible and easy to understand.
Right. Because if it's too complicated or bureaucratic,
People just won't bother.
exactly, and then the whole thing falls apart.
So clear communication and collaboration, those are essential.
Between the regulator and the businesses.
Absolutely. Working together to find solutions.
Okay, so let's say we get all that right.
Mhm.
The costs are manageable. The regulations are
And
clear.
everyone's on board.
But then there's the whole question of, like, what does this actually look like in practice?
Right. How does this culture of preparedness actually manifest?
Are we expecting, like, every bartender in the UK to suddenly become a terrorism expert?
No. No, of course not.
Because that seems a bit unrealistic.
It's not about turning everyone into a security professional overnight.
So what is it about then?
It's about fostering a sense of awareness.
Okay, awareness of what?
Of potential threats, suspicious activity, that sort of thing.
But without, like, freaking everyone out.
Right, it's a fine line.
So, like, what kind of things would staff be trained to look out for?
Well, the training would likely cover things like identifying suspicious packages.
Okay, unattended bags, that kind of thing.
Exactly, and recognizing signs of potential threats, like someone acting suspiciously or making threats.
So it's more about giving them the tools to note in things that seem off.
Right, and then knowing how to respond appropriately.
So not just, like, ignoring it and hoping for the best.
No, it's about taking action, but doing so in a calm and measured way.
Like alerting the manager, calling the authorities.
Depending on the situation, yeah.
Okay, so it's about empowering staff to be vigilant but not paranoid.
Exactly. It's about creating a network of informed individuals.
Who can work together to keep things safe.
Precisely. That's the goal.
Okay, so it sounds like a pretty big shift in mindset.
It is. It's moving away from that reactive approach.
Where security only gets ramped up after something bad happens.
Yeah, and towards a more proactive, preventative stance.
So everyone's a little more prepared, a little more aware.
Exactly, and that's a key aspect of Martyn's Law.
It's about taking responsibility for security.
Not just leaving it to the police or the government.
It's a collective effort.
A societal shift in how we think about safety.
Okay, so that all sounds good in theory.
Mm-hmm.
But how does it actually get enforced?
Well, the regulator will have the power to conduct inspections.
Right, so they'll be going around checking on venues.
Exactly, making sure they're complying with the requirements of their designated tier.
So they'll be checking for those risk assessments.
Yep, making sure they've been completed and are up to date.
The staff training records.
Seeing that staff have received the appropriate training.
The implementation of security measures.
Yeah, checking for things like CCTV cameras, adequate lighting, clear signage.
So it's not just a paper exercise.
No, they'll be physically going to the venues, making sure things are in place.
Okay, so let's say I'm a pub owner and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this.
It's a lot to take in.
What happens if I don't quite get everything right?
Well, the regulator will have a range of enforcement options at their disposal.
Okay, so what are we talking about?
They might start with some guidance and advice.
Like a warning.
More like, hey, here's some things you need to improve on.
Okay, so a chance to fix things.
Exactly. But if a venue is repeatedly non-compliant,
like they just ignore the warnings,
or they're blatantly disregarding the law, then they could face fines or other penalties.
So there are consequences for not taking this seriously.
Absolutely. The law has teeth.
But it sounds like the focus is more on education and collaboration.
Ideally, yes. The goal is to get everyone on the same page.
Working together to create a safer environment.
Exactly. That's the ultimate aim.
And I imagine there will be a bit of a learning curve as this all gets rolled out.
Definitely. It's a big change.
Businesses will need time to adapt, to figure things out.
And that's why clear communication from the regulator is so important.
Giving people the information they need to comply.
And providing support along the way.
Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing.
Which is...
to enjoy our pubs and clubs and theaters and all that.
Of course.
But to do so safely.
Exactly. To feel secure without feeling stifled.
To find that balance.
That elusive sweet spot.
Between freedom and security.
Between vigilance and normalcy.
And that's what Martyn's Law is all about.
At its core, yeah, that's the challenge.
Well, it's a big challenge.
It is, but it's a necessary one.
And it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Definitely. A lot of eyes will be on the UK as this gets implemented.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have, yeah, a lot to digest.
But I think we've got time for one more thought.
Okay.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Martyn's Law, what's the one key takeaway you want our listener to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that Martyn's Law isn't about living in fear.
It's not about becoming paranoid or suspicious of everyone.
No, it's about informed awareness.
Okay, I like that, informed awareness.
It's about understanding the risks, taking sensible precautions, and working together to create a safer environment for everyone.
Not letting fear dictate our lives.
Exactly. We can be vigilant without being afraid.
I think that's a great message to end on.
I hope so.
And listener, I'd like to leave you with a question to ponder.
Okay.
Think about your favorite places. The pubs, the clubs, the theaters, the venues you love to visit. How would they be affected by Martyn's Law?
It's something to consider.
Does it change how you feel about going there?
Food for thought.
Definitely something to think about as this law comes into effect.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious. That's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we balance, keeping people safe, but also not turning the UK into some kind of, surveillance state?
Yeah, no one wants to feel like they're constantly being watched.
Exactly. It's about finding that middle ground.
Where you can go out and enjoy yourself without feeling like you're in a prison.
Yeah, because if you go too far in either direction,
right,
it's going to backfire.
People will either become complacent or they'll just stay home out of fear.
And that's not what we want.
No, the goal is to empower people, not scare them.
To make them feel safer, not more vulnerable.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with Martyn's Law.
It is. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Because there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Every venue is different. Every situation is unique.
And the threats are constantly evolving.
Yeah. What worked 5 years ago might not work today.
So it's not enough to just put these measures in place and then forget about them.
No, it needs to be an ongoing process.
Of evaluation, adaptation, improvement.
Exactly. Constantly learning and adjusting to the changing landscape.
And that's where the role of the regulator becomes so important.
It is. They need to be flexible and responsive.
Not just stuck in their ways, enforcing the rules blindly.
They need to be open to feedback, to new ideas, to different approaches.
And they need to be working closely with businesses and communities.
Yeah, it's a partnership, not a dictatorship.
Because ultimately, it's all about finding what works.
What keeps people safe without compromising their freedoms?
What strikes that balance between security and normalcy?
It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it.
Well, hopefully they're up to the task.
I have faith in them.
Me too. I think we have to.
For everyone's sake.
All right, well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Martyn's Law.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a fascinating conversation, as always.
I always enjoy these chats.
Me too. And listener, if you've made it this far, we commend you.
You're a true deep diver.
And we hope you've learned something new, something to think about.
That's the goal.
To spark those conversations, to get people thinking critically about these important issues.
Because that's how we make progress.
By engaging, by questioning, by challenging the status quo.
And by working together to find solutions.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Remember, Martyn's Law is just one piece of the puzzle.
It's a step in the right direction.
But it's not a magic bullet.
No, it's up to all of us to create a safer world.
By being aware, by being prepared, by looking out for each other.
And by never giving in to fear.
So until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
And thanks for listening.